So, good morning.
Good morning.
Today's message is the second in a 5-part series based on 2 books by Miguel Ruiz, The 4 Agreements, and a later book called The 5th Agreement. Miguel is a traditionally trained surgeon and also a Nigual, a shaman of the ancient Toltec tradition in Mexico. The information in both books was derived from Toltec knowledge, which reveals the source of our limiting beliefs and teaches us how to transcend those beliefs and adopt a code of conduct that transforms life into a new experience of freedom, happiness, and love. You may recall, if you were here, that last week we began by talking about the childhood process called domestication, by which we are programmed with the beliefs and values of our parents, teachers, priests, and ministers. Toltec wisdom teaches that our task in adulthood is to sort through all that programming and choose our own beliefs, behaviors, and values. In doing so, we come to know ourselves and are therefore empowered to live as authentic, mature adults. Last week's lesson was on the first agreement, be impeccable with your word. Remember, our word is our creative power. Where have we heard that before? Sounds a little bit unity to me. We can use the power of our word to move energy in the direction of truth, harmony, and love, thereby creating a piece of heaven on earth for ourselves and those around us. Or we can use the power of our word to speak or think negatively and destructively about ourselves and others, and thereby create a piece of hell on earth for ourselves and others. The bottom line is, if our desire is to be a joyous co-creator with God, it's essential we learn to speak with integrity, which means speaking life-enhancing words of love, peace, and wholeness that are congruent with the truth. And what truth are we talking about? That because we were created in the image of God, our inherent nature is also love and goodness. Where have we heard that before? Second principle. By the way, this new thought that we teach is about 4,000 or 5,000 years old, but I'm just saying. Ruiz says that the first agreement is the most important because it's the foundation on which all the others rest. So now that we are practicing impeccability, right? Practicing, we're ready to add agreement 2, take nothing personally. So get ready. This one, I don't know about you, hit me right where I live, so let's see what happens with you. Miguel teaches that taking things personally is devastating because it makes our happiness dependent on how others behave toward us. When we take another's negative opinion of us personally, it is because somewhere deep down we believe that what they are saying is true. When someone slings a harsh, unfair judgment at us, they are slinging poison. But until we swallow that poison by agreeing with it, it is powerless to harm us. That's a big thing. So take George, for example. George, who is African American, tried unsuccessfully to gain admission to an all-white church. Year after year, the church gave him and his family a different reason for the rejection. Since George took that rejection very personally, he was angry, resentful, and bitter. One night he knelt down at his bed and prayed, "Dear God, time after time I've tried to become a member of that church, and every time they reject me. Can you help me?" Suddenly, a deep voice boomed from somewhere high above. "Don't feel bad, George. I've been trying to get into that church a lot longer than you have, and they won't let me in either." Kind of funny, but a very important point. While George was thinking the rejection was about who he was, In reality, the rejection was a demonstration of who the people in that church were. This is an incredibly important distinction. In unity, we teach that nothing and no one is against us. We teach that the universe is benevolent. In George's position, I'll bet most of us would probably have been hurt or angry and frustrated also. No one likes to be rejected. But let me ask you this. Do you think being part of a church filled with bigotry would be in George's best interest? Would he have been able to grow into a more spiritual, authentic person in an environment where many of the people were judgmental toward him? George kept banging on a closed door. Why would he do that? Surely there were other wonderful churches in town. Was it his need to feel validated that kept him coming back? Did he have something to prove? Don't you feel a little sad and embarrassed for him that he kept putting himself in the path of rejection and allowing himself to be treated poorly? When we give our power away by allowing others to have sovereignty over our spirit, we are sitting ducks for anyone who might want to spew their personal pain and poison over us. In fact, our pain and low self-esteem are literally attracting theirs. Like does attract like, after all. By putting into someone else's hands the power to make us feel good or feel bad, we are engaging in a life-alienating dance that is destructive for both people. You could call it the domestication dance. It's easy to tell when you have given your power away. Afterwards, you feel worn out, like the life force has leaked out of you. You feel downhearted, maybe even a little sick. These feelings are often followed by second-guessing and self-doubt. Maybe I should have done this or done that. Maybe I should have said this or said that. Then comes the anger, blame, and resentment. Maybe even the desire to get even. A pretty miserable cycle which most people are all too familiar with. Taking things personally is evidence of being trapped in what Don Miguel calls personal importance. This, he says, is the ultimate expression of self-centeredness. I am making the assumption that what someone else is saying, doing, or feeling is all about me. I am thinking that I am responsible for what someone else thinks and feels. This is a direct result of the domestication process. Because, see, children think everything is about them, don't they? The mother's in a bad mood, and it's because they are bad children. The parents break up, and it's because they have failed to make them happy. So here's the belief breaker. Nothing anyone else thinks, says, or does about you is about you. It's all about them. How they see things, how they view life, what consciousness they dwell in. What others say and do to you is a projection of their reality. Even if someone insults you directly, it has nothing to do with you. Even if you have done the thing they are claiming that you have done, even if you have the character quality they are insulting you for, it has nothing to do with you. It has to do with the way they view and interpret what you have said and done. Other people's worldview can only be a reflection of their values, belief, and yes, their programming. Believing it's about me is a parasite of the mind called not being good enough. The belief that we're not good enough causes us to suffer and limits our creativity and the possibilities we hold for our lives. And it makes healthy relationships just about impossible. Thinking ourselves responsible for what others are feeling is the same odd combination. It's a very weird combination, actually, of personal importance and not good enough. It is evident in thoughts like, if only I were enough, I could help them feel better and help them see things differently. I could change their mind. Beliefs like, I'm not good enough, or I'm not adequate, or I'm not lovable, are like demons living within us, and they make us easy prey for anyone who wants to dump their emotional garbage onto us. Another version of taking things personally is to be offended by what someone says or does. Actually, all that has happened is that they have bumped up against my conditioning, and now I have to defend it. Our whole belief system is built on this conditioning, and so we are desperate to justify it and to be right. So in reality, being offended is all about us also, not about anyone else. Our reactions are all a part of our domestication. So let's pause here and consider the distinction between an unhealthy sense of self-importance, personal importance, and healthy self-esteem. Actually, though they sound a bit alike, they are opposites. People with true self-esteem examine their own motivations and reactions, not with harsh self-judgment, but out of a sincere desire to know who they are and grow in their expression of their true selves. People with healthy self-esteem are able to recognize when someone is in pain and respond with compassion. Because they know they are lovable, they are able to be love for others. Because their inner world is filled with light and truth, only matching energies of light and truth can enter. And they naturally move toward the light and away from darkness. On the other hand, people trapped in self-importance are fragile. Their default reaction is, how dare he do that to me? Or what did I do to cause them to treat me so poorly? These folks, and I imagine they're all of us from time to time, have very well-developed defense strategies. They have to. Since they have very poor boundaries and they have low self-esteem, they must put up walls to protect themselves. If I had to say in one sentence what unity does for people, I would say that it is a way of life that helps people grow in personal power and self-esteem so that they can, in turn, bring light into the world. Self-knowledge and self-empowerment, that's what we're after. But in that false world run by our demons, it's normal to suffer, to live in fear, to create emotional drama. Ruiz said something that was very thought-provoking to me. A lot of things he said were very thought-provoking. But he said that most human beings are addicted to suffering, at least to some degree. He says we tend to support one another in this suffering. We even agree to help each other suffer. If I have been programmed to accept abuse or neglect, I guarantee you I will go out and find somebody to do the job. Because I'm already in pain, I look for someone to do the things that justify the suffering so that together we can create this condition we're calling hell on earth. Addiction to suffering is an agreement that gets reinforced every day as long as we continue to take things personally. For example, wherever we go, we will find people who lie to us. You might have noticed that around these days. They do this either because they are not aware of the truth or because they are afraid. They say what they believe they must say. We take this personally. We get angry and upset about it. And so we suffer, and we will not stop suffering until we accept another big thing from Ruiz, that we cannot count on people to tell us the truth. And that's okay. What we need to do is to trust ourselves to discern between what is true and what is not true. If someone in our life consistently says one thing but does another, we are lying to ourselves if we don't listen to their actions. If we are truthful with ourselves, we'll save ourselves a lot of emotional pain. So often I hear, couples especially, but also friends, he or she says that she loves me, but she does not treat me with love and respect. And so often, and I know I've been here too, we choose to ignore this incongruity. We may endure years of emotional suffering with that person. If we do choose to walk away from that relationship, we may hurt for a while, but eventually we'll heal and go on to make better choices. We do not need to trust other people nearly as much as we need to trust ourselves and make right choices for ourselves. Sounds radical, doesn't it? And what if all true forgiveness is self-forgiveness? Which means taking responsibility for the situation we find ourselves in. When we take responsibility for our choices, including the bad ones, we take our power back and set the stage for more life-enhancing choices in the future. In a nutshell, the way out of suffering is self-awareness. There is a famous legend that the Buddha passed a man on the road, and the man was struck by his radiance and peacefulness, and the man stopped him and asked, "My friend, are you a celestial being?" "No," said the Buddha. "Are you some kind of magician or wizard?" Again, the Buddha said no. "Are you a saint?" "No," said the Buddha. "Well then, my friend, what are you?" And the Buddha responded, "I am awake." Being awake is being aware. And this is not easy, because nearly everything we learn through our domestication process and the subsequent false beliefs that we have adopted have clouded our awareness. But we can start practicing awareness today by telling ourselves the truth, by not deceiving ourselves what other people or the life about other people or the life we're living, by not deceiving ourselves about what we feel or pushing our feelings away or judging them or blaming someone else for them, by simply learning to sit still and feel what we honestly feel. We practice by accepting reality the way it is, rather than telling ourselves it is something else or ought to be. We practice by trusting our intuition and inner guidance to steer our lives. We practice through honest self-observation. And we practice by steadfastly placing our faith in ourselves and in our God, rather than in other people. To practice being awake is to accept deep down that we always have choices. We may not be able to control what happens to us, but we do have a choice about how we react to what happens. We cannot avoid pain in this life, but we can certainly minimize our sufferings. Ruiz says, if we learn to change our reactions, we can change our habits. And if we change our habits, we change our lives. And it all begins with how we choose to respond to what others say and do. Perhaps most important, Ruiz says, is the way we respond to ourselves. You know, there's a great bumper sticker out there that says, I shouldn't believe everything I think. It's one of my favorites. He goes farther. He says we have the right to believe or disbelieve our own inner voices, just as we have the right to accept or reject what other people say. If what the committee in our minds is saying is not helpful, not uplifting, and not true, we can and should reject those thoughts. We do not have to believe every critical thing we say about ourselves. We don't have to take personally what the voices in our mind says. We have the right, he goes farther, he says we have the responsibility to choose what we think about ourselves. The obsessive self-criticism that runs through our mind is a clear indicator that we are living our domestication process yet again. Honest, compassionate self-observation, on the other hand, is the process of becoming our own person. When we have been honest with ourselves, when we take responsibility for what we've done and responsibility for the situation we're in, and when we've forgiven ourselves, we are free. And we'll know we're free because we'll recover easily from mistakes. We don't suffer over them because we no longer entertain that critical committee in the mind. Our judgments of ourselves and other people are all about that committee in the mind. Two monks were walking down the road and they came upon a young woman waiting to cross a stream. One of the monks, to the dismay of the other, went over to the woman, picked her up, carried her over the water, and set her back down again. A few miles later down the road, one monk says to the other, he said, I'm just absolutely aghast at you. We are celibate. We're not even supposed to even look at a woman, much less touch one. How could you pick up that woman and carry her across the water? And the other monk said, well, I put that woman down 5 miles ago, and you're still carrying her around with you. When we take things personally, we carry our painful feelings on for a long time, and they are a weighty burden on our backs. Don Miguel makes us this promise. If you can keep the second agreement, you can travel this world with your heart completely open. No one can hurt you. You can say, I love you without fear of ridicule or rejection. You can ask for what you need. You can say yes or you can say no, whatever you choose, without guilt or self-judgment. I don't know about you, but I think that sounds great. Living with hearts wide open, loving ourselves and other people, accepting life and people just as they are without illusion or denial, feeling free and at peace. Now that's a life worth the price of admission to me. God bless you. That's the second agreement.